The New York Giants' first 53-man roster for the 2025 season is out, but there could be some changes over the next 24 to 36 hours. We'll talk about the roster as it stands and some of the tweaks that may be made. And of course, we always want to hear from you. Next on the Big Blue Breakdown, live. Hi again, everybody. I'm Paul Dottino, and welcome to the Big Blue Breakdown Live. So glad you could join us tonight on a very special show. We're coming to you on an unusual evening, Tuesday instead of our normal Wednesday time slot, because news requires it. Breaking news today, as all of the teams had to get down to 53 men on their roster. Now, as far as I know, this is the first live-in Giants talk show since the official list came out at 4 o'clock today. As you probably know, head coach Brian Daboll had a media conference with the Giants beat reporters earlier at about 12:30 this afternoon and said he was not going to discuss anything regarding the roster. He had no comment at all to offer, saying that instead he would prefer to have a dual news conference tomorrow afternoon with general manager Joe Schoen. So without official notification of the players who were removed from the Giants' 90-man roster, well, what was 80 men by the time they got to this morning, there really wasn't much to say because you never know exactly what's going to happen until 4 o'clock. Sure, there were rumors as early as 8 o'clock this morning about guys who would be removed, but until you know all the specifics, until every detail has been ironed out, and you find out if there were trades, if guys are going to the injured list, if guys are going to be waived injured, or if guys are going to be released, or if guys are going to be waived. There's a lot of little details, a lot of little corn kernels on that cob that have to be sorted out. So it's always wise to wait until the official list comes out after 4 o'clock to find out exactly what the team did. And again, this is why we're here tonight, because as far as I know, this is the first time that Giants fans are going to have a chance now to talk about this list, which at the moment is the 53-man roster. But I warn you folks, the practice squad can be named tomorrow at 12 o'clock. Players are currently passing through waivers right now. The Giants are scouring the wire. They've got the third pick on the waiver wire. So there's a really good chance that they may grab a player or two by tomorrow morning and wind up having to sub out some people on the 53 that we have tonight. So be aware of that. Also be aware there are some street free agents. Potentially there'll be a guy or two they might be interested in. If they do anything with those guys, they'll have to sub them out. Starting tomorrow at 12 o'clock, the Giants can also start naming their 17-man practice squad. Now, why do I say 17? The NFL allows you to sign 16, but because Jude McAtamney, the Giants' rookie kicker from last year, who is an Irishman, he gets an international exemption. So if the Giants want to bring McAtamney back tomorrow, he actually becomes the 17th practice squad player if they so decide to bring him back. Okay? So that would be 53 that you have tonight, plus potentially 17 tomorrow, and that would give the Giants 70 players in the building. Now, one other item before we get to the details of what happened today and what you guys might want to chime in about. And that is as follows. When these practice squads come out the next day after the cutdown day, at least 2/3 of those players, sometimes as many as 75%, and maybe even more, were guys that the team originally had during training camp anyway and were just cut 24 hours earlier. So it is highly likely that a big chunk of the guys the Giants released today will be coming back tomorrow. In fact, according to unofficial calculations, over the last 5 years, only an average of about 30 players per year have been claimed. Well, folks, you understand there are 32 teams in the National Football League. So that averages out to roughly one claimed person per team per season. So don't necessarily expect a mass exodus of the guys that the Giants parted with today. In fact, you can probably expect many of them to return to the practice squad tomorrow and actually be out on the practice field as the Giants continue preparations for their Week 1 game against the Washington Commanders. So now that we got that stuff out of the way, that sets the table for anything that you guys may want to talk about, want to ask about, and of course, as we go through the list. I will throw out these questions, and please, as you see to the side of your screen, you have the opportunity to chat with me. You also have the opportunity at the bottom of the screen, as you see here, there is a floating link. If you go to that link, you can actually give me a telephone call. If you'd like to activate your camera, you can give me a video call, and we'll make you a superstar by putting you on the screen so that everybody can see you as well. 3 ways to get a hold of me. So by all means, let me give you tonight's topical question of the program. I would like to know, who do you folks think was the most surprising cut of today's pairing? Who do you think? Giants are down to 53. Again, maybe the guy you name winds up coming back tomorrow. Who knows? But who do you think the most surprising cut was from today's list? Now, I'm going to assume that most of you have seen the list, but not everybody has. So bear with me just a moment as I read the names of the guys who were cut, and then I want to go through a couple of generic points, strategically speaking, as I see the Giants 53 as it sits tonight, and then I'm going to go right to you guys. Go to your chats and so forth and see what we can do about getting you involved, because after all, this program is for you guys, all right? That's why I'm here. All right. So waivers, which means a player who has less than 4 years of NFL experience and is subjected to the waiver rule, which means teams now go in the reverse order of last year's standings and have an opportunity to claim a player. If a player is claimed, he has no choice but to go to the team that claims him, or for that matter, he can sit out and not play this year. The following players were waived by the Giants today. Wide receiver Dylan Cambry, defensive lineman Elijah Chapman, quarterback Tommy DeVito, tight end Greg Dulcich, defensive lineman Corey Durden, outside linebackers Trace Ford and Tamon Fox, defensive lineman Elijah Garcia, center Brian Hudson, guard Jake Kubas, safety Raheem Lane, kicker Jude McAtamney, we already mentioned him, running back Dante Turbo Miller, center Jimmy Morrissey, safety Makari Page, defensive lineman Jordan Riley, wide receiver Juice Wells, and cornerback D. Williams. The following 5 players were immediately set free. They've got 4 or more years of experience, which means they become immediate street free agents and can sign anywhere they choose. Offensive tackle Stone Forsythe, wide receiver Little Jordan Humphrey, defensive lineman Jeremiah Ledbetter, wide receiver kick returner Amir Smith-Marset, and running back Jonathan Ward. Now, any of those players that I just named out of that group, they could immediately, tomorrow at 12 o'clock, re-sign with the Giants as practice squad players. Because remember, they were not subjected to waivers, so their rights don't get transferred anywhere. They can do whatever they so choose. And it wouldn't shock me, for example, if little Jordan Humphrey, winds up re-signing with the Giants as a practice squad player. As far as the waived players, which was the first group that I mentioned to you, and it's important you guys understand these rules, that first group has to pass through waivers first. If nobody claims them as of 12 o'clock, then they become street free agents and they could re-sign with the Giants right after 12 o'clock. But as it stands now, up until 12, all of the other NFL teams, the other 31 teams, have an opportunity to put a claim in for them and take their contract from the Giants. Okay? They would have to take the contract that the player had while he was with the team. It would get transferred to the new player. But if a player does not get claimed, it means that as of 12 o'clock now, he's free to do whatever he wants, which means he could just as easily come back to the Giants practice squad. Just so you guys have an understanding of the rules. The other players who were jettisoned today, waived injured, wide receiver DeQuan Felton, cornerback Trey Hawkins, tight end Jermaine Terry. Those guys, because they were waived injured, they got, unfortunately, no opportunity tomorrow to come back to the practice squad because they have some type of bumps, bruises, or nicks, and that eliminates them from that situation tomorrow. The physically unable to perform list, this is a separate list. Eric Gray is on that. We knew because he hadn't practiced the entire training camp. Victor Dimukeji, the offensive linebacker, had gotten hurt earlier during the offseason. So those two guys are on the PUP list. They don't count against the 53. They go off to the side. And then finally, a very interesting rule that nobody knows about. Last year, the NFL put in a new rule to try to give more flexibility to teams who had guys nicked up. They allow you beyond your 53, they allow you 2 players who you can put on an injured list with a designation for return after the 4th game of the regular season. In effect, that allowed every team to keep 55 players. Do you understand now? The 53 that are active tonight, but you also get 2 injured reserve players that are required to miss the first 4 games of the season. The Giants made use of this rule today. So they actually kept 54 players because offensive lineman Joshua Ezeudu, who had not practiced the last couple of days, was put on injured reserve, designated for return. So Ezeudu can come back after the 4th game of the season, which is a home game against the Los Angeles Chargers, meaning he would be eligible for the New Orleans Saints game on October the 5th. Okay? So that gets you caught up to speed on what the Giants did today and all of the machinations that are involved that can be executed over the next 24 hours. Now, let me see what I can do about going over to some of your chats because I see a whole bunch of folks have some things written in. I also want to go over for you some of the general observations I have about the strategy and who the Giants kept. But let me see if I can get to some of your comments first because you people are very active right now and so nice joining the program. Allison, hello back to you. Very nice to have you on the program tonight. Scott Young as well. And Robert Erda says he feels some good claims coming. Well, Robert, I got a couple of ideas as to where the Giants might be claiming some folks. But again, that's gonna depend on exactly what has been released today. It would be very easy to say, oh, I think the Giants should claim a safety. Well, that's an easy thing to say because they only kept 3 regular safeties on the 53 tonight. But what if they don't like any of the safeties who were released earlier this afternoon? Well, then it doesn't make sense to claim a safety. Then what you might do is use Nick Jones, who is one of the corners that the Giants kept, who has some safety versatility in his game. If the Giants don't see any safeties that they like on the bookshelf, well, then it doesn't pay to claim one. So we got to hold our horses on this, Robert. We got to see what that full list looks like, and the Giants may not find the cup of tea that they want there. Walter F., great to have you. James O'Keefe, thank you so much for joining the program tonight. Aiden Fink says, I'm at a concert and we'll be back next week. Just wanted to drop by for a second. Aiden, thank you so much for at least stopping in with us. We certainly hope you catch the show on the archive, perhaps later on after you get back, or maybe tomorrow morning. Isaac Moore says, terrible that Turbo Miller missed the cut. I agree with you. I always tell people, I have no business, nor does anyone else, predicting or telling you what Brian Daboll and what Joe Schoen are going to do. They've got literally folders and folders, well, it's computer folders, not real folders, right, of information on every player. They have so much more in terms of the factors to weigh than any reporter could possibly have. And so it's really like the blind leading the blind when someone predicts, what the Giants are going to do with a player, because nobody outside the front office truly knows. So what I like to do, and what I did on Big Blue Kickoff Live yesterday with John, what I do is, based on the information that I have, based on the firsthand accounts that I've seen every practice during the offseason and training camp, and of course I have attended and covered every of the Giants preseason games. So what I always say is, I will give you my 53 if I were sitting in Joe Schoen's chair. I don't pretend, I'm not going to be a fraud or a hypocrite and pretend to know what Joe Schoen knows. I'm simply going to tell you, based on what I have been able to digest, who my 53 were, and Turbo Miller was on my 53 as the fourth running back on the Giants roster. I will tell you, my opinion, I'd love to see him back. He was on the practice squad last year, and I hope he makes it back to the practice squad tomorrow. He is one player who I really fear could get claimed and get scapped up by another team. I hope he does not, because selfishly, I love what he did during the preseason. I'd liked having him around last year. He was my undrafted rookie free agent dark horse of 2024, and he stuck around. And so I certainly would like to see him stick around and get back into the building at 12 o'clock tomorrow. The Big Beaux says, hey, Paul, good to see you. He's got Elijah Chapman and Turbo as the surprise cuts. Chapman is very interesting. I also would have had him on my 53. But here is the rationale behind the whole Chapman thing. The Giants decided to keep DJ Davidson as their last defensive lineman on the depth chart. Clearly, it probably came down to him. Probably. I shouldn't say clearly. I don't want to assume anything. But I would think it came down to Chapman or DJ Davidson. They are two totally different players, different styles, different frames. Chapman probably weighs about 30 pounds less than DJ Davidson, and he's also several inches shorter than DJ Davidson. Chapman is more of a three technique, that would be a pass rushing, penetrating defensive tackle. DJ Davidson has bulked up significantly. He's well over 300 pounds. He's bigger, boxier, and much more of a nose tackle than a penetrating defensive tackle pass rusher. Nose tackles are pluggers. Those guys hold the point of attack and try to stop the run. I think what it ultimately came down to, even though Chapman was being used a little bit as a fullback And that versatility certainly made him more valuable, and he made some punishing blocks as a fullback over the last few weeks. And that's why I went and I leaned toward Chapman. But if you look at the Giants' defensive line room, they don't have a true nose tackle to back up Dexter Lawrence. So when he comes out of the game, what would you do? You can't put Chapman in there. He's not a nose tackle. The only other true nose tackle on the Giants 53 right now is DJ Davidson. So it appears to me that the Giants must have thought it was more important to have a true backup nose tackle on the 53 than taking the versatile Chapman onto the 53. But I get how some people may feel about this, but there is certainly logic that is written in bright lights across the sky that say you didn't have a second defensive tackle, a nose tackle on this team. So rather than just hope one falls out of the sky tomorrow, you keep DJ Davidson today. And if you really like Elijah Chapman, and I know the coaching staff does have affection for him, well, then you hope that he clears waivers and that you can bring him back to the practice squad tomorrow. He would be one of the guys for sure that I would think I would want back on the practice squad. Dante Miller, certainly one of them. Elijah Chapman, certainly another one. No doubt in my mind. Robert Erda says little Jordan Humphrey, the wide receiver, was his surprise cut. Well, here's the thing, Robert. Look at the Giants wide receivers. They actually kept, believe it or not, 6, which is a big number. Most teams will keep 6 wide receivers. The Giants went with Neighbors, Slayton, Robinson, Hyatt. I pretty much expected those 4, and I would have kept those 4 as well. But then they went with 5 and 6. They took Gunnar Olszewski as the 5th receiver, beating out Emir Smith-Marsette. Because remember, he and Smith-Marsette are both kick returners and wide receivers. They only had room for one of them. Olszewski wound up beating out Smith-Marsette, and I believe it's because Olszewski has the ability to play either boundary receiver or slot receiver. Smith-Marsette is a boundary receiver. I don't see him really being much of a factor in the slot. So you have 2 receivers there who were both very good at returns. Smith-Marsette better at kickoff returns. Olszewski better at punt returns. But then the thing that differentiated them is that Olszewski can play the slot and Smith-Marsette really not suited to it based on his body type and his skill type. So they decided to go with Olszewski. And then the number 6 receiver on the Giants' 53-man roster, and again, I'm assuming this, is Beaux Collins, the free agent rookie out of Notre Dame, who I had thought all along, in my mind, had the best chance of any of the depth chart wide receivers to make it as the 6th if they were going to keep 6. I didn't think they would. Most teams don't. I had 5 on my 53. Beaux Collins is big. He's strong. He's physical. He blocks for the run. He's played some special teams. He showed good hands for the most of the offseason. Did have a couple of plays the other night against the Patriots he wished he had made, and he didn't. But the Giants clearly decided this morning that they did not want to expose him to waivers where he might get picked up. And so they went with Collins as the number 6 receiver, and he would have been in competition with little Jordan Humphrey, Robert, because here's the deal. Both of those guys are similar, right? They're taller, longer, stronger, bigger frame, more possession to medium range pass receivers with good hands. They fit body type as similar players. This is different than the Chapman contrasting with Davidson, where you're going to take a defensive lineman. Do you want the nose tackle or do you want the penetrating defensive tackle? That's the difference between an apple and an orange. In this case, you're looking at two apples with Collins and with Humphrey. And my guess, and again, I'm only guessing because it's an educated guess based on what I've known around the league for the 43 years that I've been covering the team. Usually in this situation, part of the equation is going to be which guy does the team think is going to get claimed if they leave him unprotected? They probably wanted both receivers in the building. But my hunch is that Collins being young and a rookie with maybe more upside, maybe it was more dangerous to leave him unprotected because there might be a better chance that he would get claimed. Remember, little Jordan Humphrey was a free agent during the offseason, and I don't remember him getting a whole lot of interest on the free agent market. And then the Giants signed him, and I remember when he signed, it kind of came out of nowhere. He formerly played with the Denver Broncos, where he was a teammate of quarterback Russell Wilson. Wilson likes him a lot. So it would not surprise me at all if he sneaks through waivers, because I don't think there was high demand for him. And I think the Giants probably, based on, again, the connection with Russell Wilson and the fact that he had a good camp, I would bring him back at 12 o'clock, should he still be available. James O'Keefe. Hi, Paul. I was surprised by Chapman being cut the most, but totally understand in retrospect. Well, James, if you didn't, I hope I explained it to you. Isaac Moore. He's better than Singletary, who's on his last leg. You must be talking about Turbo Miller. And I understand that. Okay? I do understand that. Also, take this into account, though. Singletary is a proven performer in the league for several years. He is a pro's pro. There are intangibles involved. He is the big brother in that running backs room. He is also a very big coach's favorite and general manager's favorite from their time in Buffalo together. Personally speaking, I do appreciate what Devin Singletary brings to the team. I just thought the Giants will, if it were me, I thought the Giants, would have 4 running backs. If I were in charge of the team, I would have kept 4 running backs. But they decided to go with 3. Let's see here. Robert says, I thought Humphrey performed better than Beaux Collins. Well, Robert, here's what I would say. I don't know how many practices during training camp that you attended. There were free tickets for, I believe, 8 or 9 practice sessions. And then, of course, there were the 3 preseason games. Remember something. The personnel folders of each of these players gets a new grade every day. From the time that they report during the offseason, all through the spring, you have the rookie minicamp, the veteran minicamp, the OTAs, right? Then, of course, you have the actual training camp itself. Now, again, as someone who attended all but 1 practice since last March, okay, I attended every one but 1. I'm not so sure that I agree with your statement. Again, I don't know how much you saw, but maybe the things that you saw, Humphrey was better. I would assume you saw a very small percentage of snaps that Collins and Humphrey took, though, since last March. And it's always very important for fans to understand that, these grades are coming in, for 6 months. They're not just coming from the 3 preseason games that were played, or maybe the 1 or 2 practices that you may have attended. That's an incomplete grade. Robert also says Gunnar taking Smith-Marsette's spot on the team was kind of surprising. I had Smith-Marsette on my 53. I thought he had done enough. He is a more accomplished kickoff returner than Olszewski, who's a more accomplished punt returner. With the new kickoff rule where the touchback comes out to the 35, okay? I thought that the kickoff return might take a little bit more of precedence in this season's NFL play. And so with that in mind, I favored Smith-Marsette, but I think it was razor thin, and I totally understand Olszewski's ability to play the slot, because who's the backup slot right now behind Wan'Dale Robinson? Yeah, exactly. Gunnar Olszewski. And he's very good at it. So I do understand why they would have made that A-B decision, if you will. Allison comes back and says, Chapman and Turbo are the most surprising. Why does the running back room seem sort of thin to me? Well, Allison, here's the deal. The Giants have Tracy, Singletary, and Scatterboo. It is 99.9% sure that they are going to have at least one running back on the practice squad. Okay? Because let's face it, running backs get dinged up, and during the course of the season, you need those guys to be able to practice. No end ifs or buts about it. You need scout team running backs, and you also need guys who may have to take first and second team reps if your starters are banged up. So you're going to see one or two running backs on the Giants practice squad. Based on what I've seen, there's no doubt that I would get Turbo Miller back as soon as I could. And I might even consider, I haven't seen the other running backs that were set free today. I might even consider Jonathan Ward. He did some nice things, the last couple of weeks when he got here. It remains to be seen. But Allison, trust me when I tell you, the Giants are not going to go into week 1 against Washington with only 3 running backs in the building. Now, again, it will likely be 3 active running backs on the roster that day. But as they open the season, they will have other running backs in the building that they can call on and elevate. Remember, practice squad players each have a maximum of 3 elevations during the course of the season. So it's critical that you have a 4th and perhaps 5th running back in the building, albeit practice squad guys, because you got to be able to call on them during the course of the year. Scott Young says, I thought Tracy Ford was waived. I thought he was a surprise. He was waived. That is correct. I'm going to look at my list again. I don't know. Did I not say he was waived? Sure. If I misspoke before, I would apologize, but I thought I said that both Ford and Tamon Fox were both waived. So Ford, a undrafted rookie free agent linebacker, outside linebacker, and edge rusher out of Oklahoma. Big time program. I thought he flashed and did some really nice things during the offseason. You remember he recovered the game-clinching fumble against the Buffalo Bills in the preseason opener. He also got some pressure on the passer during the preseason games. But right now, the Giants kept only three outside linebackers or edge rushers, if you will, on their roster. That would be Thibodeau, Carter, and Burns. That's it. And Scott, this is what happens when you overload a different position. The Giants overloaded the receivers by keeping 6. They overloaded the cornerbacks by keeping 7. and perhaps maybe we should read those to you now. Banks, Flott, Adebo, Green, Phillips, Black, and Jones. They overloaded the inside linebacker spot. Okereke, McFadden, Muasau, Board, and Flanagan-Fowles. Board and Flanagan-Fowles, by the way, were signed during the offseason as veteran free agents who specialize in dominating on special teams. That should tell you right there something that I have been stressing for months. Folks, if you remember from the first week of free agency, I have been telling you that the Giants put a heavy emphasis on their special teams units this year, and that they were going to go into this season trying to win on special teams 17-0. They believe that with a very strong defense and a dominant special teams, that's the best way for them to make things a little bit more palatable for their offense as they try to navigate their way to as many wins as they possibly can get this season. It's a very sound philosophy, one that makes perfect sense in football 101. And I applaud the Giants, actually, to be honest with you, for taking such a fundamentally sound approach to trying to win as many games as possible during the 2025 season. You take it where it goes. A dominant defense and a dominant special teams, well, that means 2/3 of the game, you've got the potential every week to win 2/3 of the game. Now all your offense has to do is play decent football. And not only you're going to be competitive and in every game, you got a chance to not only win games, but you can steal a few games too. So I totally understand the philosophy. And they're hammering that home with a freight train by keeping Board and Flanagan-Fowles 5 inside linebackers on this team. So that's what that tells you. The other place where the Giants went a little bit heavy is on the offensive line. Now, undoubtedly, that may be because, that's a contradiction in terms, right? Undoubtedly and maybe. Let me rewind that just a second. It's likely the Giants went with the 10+1 Ezeudu on the injured list on the offensive line, given the fact that the offensive line has gotten some injury issues with Andrew Thomas, right? We know that. And over the course of the last how many years, the O-line seems to be a magnet for injuries, and they don't seem to have enough depth each and every year to survive them. So they decided, we're going to protect ourselves. We're going to go heavy on the offensive line. Thomas, Runyon, JMS, Greg Van Roten, and Jermaine Eliminor, the starting 5, with Neal, along with Hudson, Beaux, Schlottman, the backup center, and Stinney. That would be the 5 backup linemen. That's 10, plus Ezeudu on recallable injured reserve. That's 11. So the Giants did go heavy in a few of these positions, and that, of course, meant they had to go light at running back with only 3. It meant they had to go light at safety with only 3. It meant they had to go light at edge rusher with only 3. And then, of course, they wound up with 4 tight ends, which that I'm sure surprised an awful lot of people. Johnson, Bellinger, Manhertz, and Thomas Fidone, who really had a terrific offseason and then a very strong preseason, a 7th-round draft choice, who made a terrific catch on a 2-point conversion pass in the end zone against the Buffalo Bills in the preseason opener. And Fidone winds up, he had a touchdown catch the other night, too, at MetLife Stadium. Fidone winds up sneaking on there, too, as the 4th tight end. All right. That's just some of the things. If there's anything else there that you want to ask about, we could do that. But I want to get to some more of your comments and your questions. Again, you can hit me up on the chat. you can hit me up at the link right below me here with a phone call or with an audio call. Both of those calls are available at that link right below my video here on the screen. Robert Urda says, I'm intrigued by Audric Estime at running back. Think the Giants were interested in drafting him. Robert, I don't know how long you've been following my work, but Estime was the number one running back in last year's draft on my radar. And when I say last year, I mean 2024. I loved him coming out of Notre Dame. He is a local product. I believe St. Joe's in Montvale High School. A guy who I absolutely thought would be a perfect fit to be a power back for the New York Football Giants. I don't know where they stand on him now. I know they got themselves a power back by drafting Cam Skattebo this season. Now, Estime is a bigger body type, but they both play a very similar style game, although I do believe Skattebo has more jukes and moves than Estime does, and Skattebo, I think, is a better pass receiver than Estime. Would the Giants consider Estime possibly on their practice squad? I don't think that's far-fetched. Again, I personally would love to see Turbo Miller get back to the practice squad, but if they're going to sign another running back, Estime would certainly be somebody on my radar. That's for sure. I remember talking to him at the Combine back in 2024. Had a great conversation with him and told him flat out, you're the number one running back on my radar for the Giants. He loved that thought. It just didn't happen. All right, Allison says she's going to keep trying to listen. She apparently lost the signal for just a bit. Brutus Gorham says, hey, Paul, my biggest surprise cuts were Dulcich, Chapman, and Miller. Also, I would look to pick up KJ Hamler as a return man off waivers. Well, let's see here. Let's address the last thing first. It's clear right now the Giants are very, very happy that they got Gunnar Olszewski back. When Ford Wheaton tore his Achilles last month, the first call they put in was to Gunnar Olszewski because he knew the system, and they felt that it would make the most sense to bring him back for training camp because they needed another wide receiver to work. Well, Olszewski came back and performed exceptionally well. I was talking to John today on the Big Blue Kickoff Live show. John Schmelk, not John Mara. Okay, John Mara was not on the show, just so you are aware. And I said to John, and I even said this to Matt Sitek. Actually, I was with Matt on the Big Blue Kickoff Live show. I was with John on the roster special that we did later on in the day. And I said to both of them, I don't remember Olszewski dropping a pass all training camp. He specifically caught a ton of throws from Jameis Winston and from Tommy DeVito. Caught a few from Jaxson Dart. And I did not have him catching any passes when I went through my notes from Russell Wilson, but caught a ton from Winston and a ton from DeVito. A lot of targets. And there may have been one or two where he had to dive and try to make a play and couldn't come up with the ball. But in terms of a drop where I can concretely say he should have caught it and it hit the ground, I don't think I had Olszewski for a drop all training camp. He was that good. I mean, seriously, he was that good. And the fact that he can also play, inside, in the slot, and outside, and he knows the system, he's tougher than nails. I don't think I would make a change for KJ Hamler. As far as Dulcich, caught 3 touchdown passes in the preseason. You guys, again, if you're familiar with my work during the Big Blue Kickoff Live show, and even during this show, whole off season, I kept saying, don't sleep on Greg Dulcich. I think he's one of the tight ends that's going to be in this mix, and it's going to be a tight competition. It's going to be brutal because you're going to have to cut somebody who's good. There's no doubt in my mind. The tight end competition was going to be very, very tough. Dulcich did not survive this morning. Does he get claimed? Well, he's been in this league for a handful of years, and he's had an awful lot of injuries. Finally, the Broncos gave up on him. He was a favored player of Russell Wilson when Wilson was in Denver, and Wilson made that very clear when he got to the Giants that he's a big Greg Dulcich fan. I think Dulcich performed well enough that he belongs in the NFL. I absolutely believe that. Do I think he could get claimed? I think it's possible. Sure, I do. I also think that the Giants' tight end room is really, really good right now. The 4 guys that they kept on today's 53 are all terrific. I think this Giants' tight end room, top to bottom, is really, really strong. Now, if Dulcich doesn't get claimed, does he decide to come back here? I think the Giants would probably invite him back. Does he decide to come back? Well, why not? He knows Russell Wilson. Him and Wilson get along marvelously well. And if he doesn't get claimed, he's better off coming back here than sitting at home and possibly waiting for somebody else to call. So I would think that Dulcich has a really good chance of coming back tomorrow. But that's strictly a guess. I would certainly re-sign him if I had the opportunity to bring him back to the practice squad. I mean, I think the 3 guys you just mentioned, Brutus, Dulcich, Chapman, and Miller, if I were making the roster decisions, and again, I'm not going to speak for Joe Schoen. I will not do that. I would certainly want those 3 guys to come back into the building. Letta Candles says, what's the point of preseason? Turbo showed up, but not on the 53. Letta, you got to understand that there are so many different things that go into these decisions. And as much as I think Turbo would be on my 53, the Giants have had to make very strategic decisions here at several different positions, and this is what they came up with. Part of the equation that they must decide, and I described this situation earlier when we talked about little Jordan Humphrey and Beaux Collins, right? We talked about it with those 2 guys. Part of this situation, let me see here. Hold on just one second. I want to hit something here on my computer, just so you know. All right, there we go. Part of the situation is that you have to ask yourself, is the guy who we expose going to be claimed? Or is the guy that we expose not necessarily going to draw a lot of attention? Now, Turbo came out of Columbia and then South Carolina, right? South Carolina was a pit stop because of NCAA eligibility requirements. He wound up having to get caught in red tape, didn't get into the draft, ran a terrific 40 time in his workout, and the Giants brought him in. Now, he spent the whole season on the practice squad till the very end. He had a couple of cameos where they activated him. They rewarded him for working hard on the practice squad. They rewarded him, and they gave him a couple of real game checks. But he really never had a chance to put anything on film that an NFL team could sink their teeth into. Now, remember something. Other NFL teams, when they look at other teams' players for scouting purposes, they're looking at just those preseason games. Now, yes, Turbo played very well during the preseason for the Giants. That is true. But for a lot of other teams that might be interested, potentially might be interested in bringing him in, They don't know about the rest of the offseason that he had. That is still a mystery to them. They don't know what he's like in the locker room. They don't know about the intangibles that he brings to the table. His heart, his desire, his work habits. There's a lot of stuff they don't know. Is it possible that Turbo does not get claimed? Maybe the Giants felt like that it was a good bet. That maybe if they kept 4 running backs instead of 5 receivers, and I am giving a hypothetical here, okay? I don't like doing that, but I'll give you a hypothetical. Let's say they kept 4 backs, and let's say the wide receiver spot was where they trim one. Well, what were the chances that Beaux Collins would get taken? You see, you've got to think about these things. If we leave a guy unexposed, what are the odds are that he is going to get grabbed? This is all part of what you have to calculate when you decide what you're going to do when you submit your 53. So, Letta, I understand your frustration and your disappointment. I personally am a big fan of Dante Turbo Miller, but I do understand what the Giants did. I certainly hope that he comes back into the building, and I would be surprised, understanding that logic dictates the Giants will bring in 1 or 2 running backs for the practice squad. It makes a ton of sense that he would be one of those 2 guys. Robert Erda says Collins' moonball catch from Russell Wilson was big in the preseason. Well, it absolutely was. And didn't that highlight probably make it everywhere and anywhere around the country? Don't you think people know who Beaux Collins is after making that 80-yard grab? Robert, that's all part of what we talk about sometimes. You remember when Victor Cruz caught the 3 touchdown passes wearing number 3 for the Giants in a preseason game against the Jets, and everybody knew, and they were like, oh, look at this guy. That sealed it. There's no way the Giants could let him go through waivers. He was going to get taken by the Jets, and maybe even a whole bunch of other teams would have tried to get him too. Sometimes it's that spectacular play, not just the fact that Turbo converted a lot of first downs, but the spectacular 80-yard grab by Collins that maybe put him a little bit more on the radar of other teams around the league. So you have to consider those things. Brutus Gorham says, I had Bellinger, Nacho out due to financial reasons as well as I thought they were guys better than them. Well, the Giants obviously at this moment don't feel that they are in a tight financial struggle where they had to worry about getting some money back. I'm sure that contractual obligations are always going to be part of these equations as you're trying to dissect your 53. Listen, Brutus, let me tell you something right now. I'm going to make this very, very clear. Let me read to you, just so you guys understand, and I'm not making this up, okay? I don't make anything up. I tell you guys everything directly, honestly, frankly, and openly. Again, I've been doing this a long time, and there are a lot of different things that people don't know about that go into all of these kinds of decisions. And it takes a long time to unpack all of them and to truly understand them. And of course, you don't read about them on Twitter, and you certainly aren't going to read about them in newspaper articles because most of the time, the newspaper people don't understand or know about them. There are many, many layers to the onion, or as I like to say, strands to the spider web. All right, here we go. Let me see here. I want to read you a quote. I want to read you a quote from Brian Dable. Okay? I think this is important that I read this to you folks because I want you to understand what we're talking about here. All right, let's see. Brian Dable was asked yesterday at his media session, asking about practice squad and IR rules and how much they're involved in deciding between maybe two guys at the same spot or even a different spot, but two guys fighting for a roster place. And the question was, like, if they're kind of equal, but one is more likely to get claimed, does that factor in? And Dable says, I would say for us, for the coaching staff, there's more of this is who we believe earned the roster spot. And then there's other discussions that could be had because I'd say General Manager Joe Shane and his staff know the entire league. They're looking at the entire league. They've been studying tape of all of the preseason games where the coaches are more locked in to our team and schemes and improving guys' fundamentals and things like that. See, a lot of people just believe that a team will pick the best 53 and put them on their first 53-man roster. That's not the way it works. They're looking at positional breakdown. Certainly they're looking at some of the contractual situations. They're looking at injury factor. They're looking at inexperience versus experience. They're looking at potential. And they're also looking at the possibility or percentage chance that that player may get claimed by somebody else. All of these things go into the tomato sauce as they put it in the pot and they stir it on top of the stove. That's the point. See, so when a guy like Brutus Gorham says to me, I had them out due to financial reasons, well, that financial reasons is one of the things in the sauce. And he says, I thought there were guys better than them. Well, guess what? That's what Coach Dable is saying in that quote. Not about these two guys in particular, but what he's saying is the coaching staff has tunnel vision. They're looking at the players strictly on the field, and they're submitting, these are the guys we'd like to keep. This is the order we have. These are the guys we'd like. Now, front office, you've got other ingredients in the sauce. Okay? You've got other ingredients. Throw those other ingredients together. Keep stirring the pot. And then let's see what we come up with. That's what people have to understand. And I don't know that everybody does understand that. There are a lot of very, very important ingredients that go into these moves. It's not the best 53 players. This sauce has a lot of stuff in it. Okay. Chris Spires says, same thing we heard about Jonathan Stewart. I guess he's referring to Devin Singletary. Well, the thing about Jonathan Stewart, if you ever had the opportunity to talk to Saquon Barkley, and I have many times over his time with the Giants, he would tell you how important Jonathan Stewart was as his mentor when Barkley was a rookie. Now, if you want to be critical of Jonathan Stewart, you could easily say that the Giants gave him a rather hefty contract for a guy who was more of an intangibles influence and a mentor to Saquon Barkley. But that's on the front office. They've got to decide how much is the mentorship worth? How much are the intangibles worth? And then they've got to come up with a number, write it down on a contract, and see what they can do with the player. I think it's very obvious, production-wise, Jonathan Stewart did not give the Giants commensurate production to the contract that he signed. But see, what a lot of people don't know is that when they look at the back of Jonathan Stewart's football card, it doesn't tell you about the tremendous influence that he had on the room, specifically Saquon Barkley as his mentor. And as you know, Barkley had a very good Giants career, specifically a rookie season that was as spectacular as you possibly could have hoped for. Stewart had a big influence on Barkley. That's a fact. Again, there was value in having him here. You could argue about the contract that he signed, but anybody who says that Jonathan Stewart did not help Saquon Barkley and the Giants by his presence does not know enough about the situation. That would be sadly misguided and misinformed. Pete Cho says, Smith-Marsette wouldn't have ever even been here had Gunnar not gotten injured last year. Well, that's true, Pete. You're absolutely right. The Giants were desperate for a return guy. They needed somebody. Gunnar wound up with a bad groin, was on IR for the season. They were desperate for a return guy. Smith-Marsette popped free. They signed him, and he had a sensational season. Robert Erda says, I do like Gunnar, made some nice catches in preseason. He certainly did. I don't think the Giants were going to lose with either Gunnar or Smith-Marsette. I think that was razor thin. I really do. In my opinion, I'd have been happy with either one of them. And I do understand the slot capabilities that Gunnar adds to the equation. Pete Cho says we should claim Damian Martinez off waivers. He's a big body back that we could use as a change of pace. Well, Pete, do you want to put Martinez on the active? You want to make him a fourth running back? I don't think the Giants want to do that. I think based on the way this thing breaks down, I do think, again, based on historical evidence, it would seem that there'll be 2 running backs added to the practice squad. I don't think there's going to be a running back added to the 53. Pete also says, and he's making a mistake on this one, Chauncey Golston is technically also an edge when he was listed as an interior defensive lineman, so we technically have 4 outside linebackers. That's wrong, Pete. Actually, Golston is a defensive lineman. I know a lot of people are calling him an edge rusher, and he does work with Charlie Bullen, who is the outside linebackers pass rushing coach. The reason he works with Golston is because they're trying to enhance some of the players' pass rush skills. Chauncey Golston is not a stand-up outside linebacker edge rusher. That is not his position. That will not be where he plays for this team. He is going to be a defensive lineman. I believe he would be best used as a defensive end or as a 3-technique defensive tackle in some sub-packages. Quite frankly, Pete, Chauncey Golston should assimilate into the same role that Justin Tuck had when Tuck was with the Giants. Similar body type, similar skill set. You didn't see Justin Tuck standing up as an edge rusher or outside linebacker very often, did you? No, I don't think you did. So I'm very sensitive to this because I know there's a lot of new nomenclature and semantics that the league has developed over the years. Chauncey Golston, for me, is a defensive lineman. Robert Erda says, yes, Chauncey can play multiple positions. Well, yes, again, sub-defensive, 3-technique defensive tackle, a penetrator, and defensive end. Correct. If once or twice or 3 times or whatever it is that they decide to stand him up on the edge, I know you're going to come back and say, oh, look, he stood up on the edge. Believe me, that is not what he was brought here to do. Robert says, Andrew Thomas, please stay healthy this year. I think that's a really smart request, Robert. Also says he's very happy that Thomas Fedoni made the roster. Okay, let's see here. Robert says, always listen to BBKL. You're the godfather. I always put oregano on my pizza just for you. All right, Robert, I love it. Thank you. Manja. I believe, I appreciate all the folks who come to this show at night, because this is really a version of that show, right? Big Blue Kickoff Live that I do on Giants.com during the day. That's the weekday version of the show. And then, this is through the Sports Illustrated people, but they've given me a forum basically to adapt the show into a nighttime version. And we do one once a week here. We're going to have, by the way, starting next week on Big Blue Kickoff Live, we're going to go to our season schedule, which includes a regular rotation of all of the different announcers that we have on the Giants broadcast crew. So I know you've been used to having me on that program 4 days a week during the off season, but that's going to change up starting next week. I'll be doing 2 days a week, because we've got a slew of Giants broadcasters on the team roster, if you will, and we're all going to rotate and get our fair share starting next week. But you'll primarily be able to catch me on Mondays and Fridays during the course of the week, which means you'll be getting the game recaps on Mondays and the game previews on Fridays. Those are two of the really good days to do, and I hope you guys will stick with me on the daytime show as well. But then again, you can always catch me here on Wednesday nights during the season. So I got enough to keep me busy. It's all good. Okay, let's see here. Allison comes back and says, knows the system, in quotes, is an important element I rarely hear about when people get upset about cuts and solid people who clear waivers. One reason DeVito could clear despite success. That is possible, Allison. It is my belief, as I've stated many times on all of the programs, I believe that Tommy DeVito is clearly, without any doubt in my mind, one of the top 75 professional quarterbacks in the country today. You have 32 teams in the NFL. If all 32 teams had 3 quarterbacks, and I don't think they'll all take 3, but more and more seem to want to put 3 on their active roster. Let's just say, for argument's sake, if you've got 32 teams times 2 is 64. So there are 64 jobs for sure on active rosters for quarterbacks. Now, take another 16, right? Because that's half of 62, half of 32. So what do you have now? You have 80. And I think it's possible half the teams in this league will keep a third quarterback. So that means there are 80 jobs for quarterbacks on active rosters in the NFL. Potentially, right around that number. There's no doubt in my mind that Tommy DeVito is good enough. He's shown enough in the Giants system, and your point is well taken about knowing the system. But the Giants system has a lot of everything in it, which should make him in a better position to adapt to wherever he might go if he winds up going somewhere. He's got the ability to run RPO because the Giants have run that. He's got the ability to play with a moving pocket. Dable has shown him how to do that. He's got the ability to run just flat out rollouts. We talked about that with the moving pocket. He can pass from the pocket. He can run quarterback draws and quarterback, sneaks. They certainly have all of that in the Giants system. They got the quick release game in the Giants system. God knows they had to do that because the offensive line wasn't good enough the last few years. So he's got the quick release stuff in there. Now, maybe the deep ball isn't as much a part of the Giants system because they haven't used it a lot. Although, as many of you critics would scream about Daniel Jones the last couple of years, every time he was hurt, people kept saying, look at Drew Lock, look at Tommy DeVito, look at Tyrod Taylor. They're all throwing more deep balls than Daniel Jones did. So maybe, in fact, Tommy DeVito does understand how to also use the deep ball. So I would say that Tommy's been given a pretty good lesson in quarterback school from Brian Dable. So yes, I do think knows the system, in quotes, is a very important part of this, and why sometimes teams won't claim a player because they're like, we'd rather stick with our own guy, the devil that we know, instead of going to the devil that we don't, because the devil we know knows our system. We don't have to train him, right? Maybe there is a better player who's sitting out there, but they'd rather go with the guy that they already have in the system. They have a comfort zone with that guy, so they won't make the claim. That's very valid. And if Tommy DeVito does not get claimed by tomorrow at 12, that's probably the reason why. Because he's absolutely good enough to get claimed. There is zero doubt in my mind about that. Now, if he doesn't get claimed, do I think that Brian Daboll would welcome him back into the building or Joe Schoen would do it? I don't know the answer to that because Brian Daboll didn't answer questions about the roster today. But I know he's very fond of Tommy DeVito. I would think he'd be okay with that. But if you're Tommy DeVito, what do you want to do? See, Allison, here's the dilemma that Tommy's going to face. If he gets claimed off waivers, he's got to go to the team that claims him. He doesn't have a choice. If he doesn't get claimed on waivers, he now becomes a free agent and can sign with any team that he wants. And there may be a team at that point that says, Tommy, we didn't want you on our 53, but we'd like to sign you to the practice squad. So now if you're Tommy DeVito, what do? Do you stay home? You're a Jersey guy. You really love being here with the Giants. You really enjoyed playing with these guys. You enjoyed being home. You enjoyed the tremendous support that you got from the local community. And you know that Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka have done an awful lot in 2.5 years to make you a better professional quarterback. Now, you got to weigh all of those positives, if you're Tommy DeVito, against the one huge negative, which is you're the fourth quarterback behind probably a future Hall of Famer in Russell Wilson, another experienced veteran in Jameis Winston, who's clearly seated as the number 2 right now, and of course the future franchise quarterback in Jaxson. I mean, basically, if Tommy DeVito re-signs with the Giants on the practice squad, it's going to take an awful lot of circumstances for him to ever get another opportunity to get into a National Football League game. He's got to play chess and jump over or knock off 3 different pieces. He might decide that maybe he is better off taking a practice squad offer from another team that has a less cemented threesome in the quarterback room. Or maybe there's a team that is only keeping 2 active quarterbacks on their 53, and they want to sign DeVito to their practice squad, which means he is their practice squad guy, but it means he's their number 3 instead of their number 4. Mathematically speaking, that automatically makes it easier for him to get back on an active NFL roster. So if Tommy DeVito clears waivers and is a free agent tomorrow at 12 o'clock, he may have a very interesting decision to make as to whether or not he may want to stay if given the opportunity, or if he may want to get a fresh start somewhere else. It's a very complicated scenario. That's why, nothing about this is easy. I always say, right? Spider web with all the strands, multiple layers to the onion. You got to peel back the layers. There's no real easy answer for any of this. The more that you know and understand, not only the game of football, but all the machinations that go into it behind the curtain, you realize what a phenomenal sport and game that it really is. Robert Erda's back again, says we need Theo to have a big year at tight end and stay healthy. I don't think anybody would disagree with that. All right, what do we have here? Mikey C. Patrick Jenkins, defensive tackle from Arizona, and Damian Martinez, running back from Seahawks. G-men should have eyes on them. Okay. I did not look at the full list of NFL cuts as we were getting on the show, as coming on the show. So I am in no position at the moment to tell you who I would like to see them take. I would understand, okay, I would understand if the Giants, just based on the 53-man roster tonight, I would understand if they added a safety. I would understand if they found maybe an upgraded slot corner behind Phillips. I would probably understand it as far as the, yeah, I think those spots are probably the two most likely, as I sit here, that I would try to add to. Safety, and probably if there was an accomplished slot corner that was available. Because I suspect, and I'm talking about to put guys on the 53. Practice squad's a whole nother story because, you know, that's a slew of guys, and those guys are going to be added for depth purposes, and you put them on the practice squad. You get 3 elevations per player before you have to decide to make a move if you want to elevate the guy for the season. So that's a different story. But right now, as I look at the 53, I think safety and perhaps slot corner would be the two areas on the 53 that I would probably be looking for as a possible claim if somebody was really catching my fancy. Robert says it would be funny if Colts claimed Tommy DeVito and took the starting job from Daniel Jones in mid-season. Okay. Let's see here. John says, after Collins caught that moon ball, he continued to run his routes wrong, not on the same page with his quarterbacks. Better not do that again in the regular season. Well, there was the interception, right? The interception in the end zone when Russell Wilson thought Collins was going one way. Collins went the other way, and the ball was picked off. That was just the other night. Yep, I remember the play very well. And Russell Wilson, like the quality veteran leader that he is, he took the rap for it. Because that's what leadership means, especially if you're a quarterback. But you're right. You're right. Collins, there was a miscommunication there with Collins, and that's a mistake you can't make in the regular season, especially when it costs you the ball. Big Dash Nose says, no Bellinger slander. Well, I happen to be a Daniel Bellinger fan. I like what he brings to the table. So I had him on my 53. There was never a question about that. Mark B., one of our regulars, says, I miss Turbo and Chapman already. I think some team is going to take Turbo off the practice squad, unfortunately. Okay. Isaac Moore says, Dulcich is much better. Big Dash says, better receiver, but not a better tight end. Big Pat says, we need a veteran safety and an elite number 2 wide receiver, and we can go to war in the NFC. Well, you just heard me mention that if I could find a quality safety on the wire, I would certainly think about grabbing him for the 53. As far as wide receiver 2, I don't think that's in the cards. I think the Giants are very happy with their wide receiver room. In fact, they just allowed a few quality wide receivers to come off of their roster today, and I would think that it makes sense that you'll see at least a couple of those guys come back to the practice squad. I certainly think that I thought they did enough that they would warrant it. Wide receiver was another position that you've listened to me for months, last 2 months for sure. I've said the wide receiver position was going to be a really nasty cut because there were going to be good players that were going to have to get moved. Mark B says, Dash likes Belly a lot. Looks like Dave's does too. The whole Giants organization is a big fan of Daniel Bellinger. Robert Erda says, Paulie's making some great sauce. Love it. Manja. C. Sanders says, hey, Pat. I guess he's talking to Big Pat, who was one of our other chat people. Says, are there any players who you think we should claim off of waivers? Well, I don't know if you guys have already looked at that. Oh, then it says, sorry, Paul, autocorrect. See, Sanders, I am sorry again. By the time I got home and took care of business and then got ready for this show, I did not get a chance to study the entire NFL list. Remember, okay, there are literally like thousands of players that got released. So, I mean, each team, depending upon how many they already got rid of during the week, teams had to get down from 90 to 53. That's 37. All right, so let me just calculate this. We'll just do a rough number, okay? Based on what we know, right? What do we know? We know that there are 32 teams. I'm gonna just pop this up on the calculator. 32 teams times 37 players. That's 1,184 players. It's over 1,100 players have been released in the last day and a half, let's just say. This is why the personnel department of the New York Football Giants and everyone else in this league has several people, not just one, several people scanning the list from the league with a fine-tooth comb, trying to figure out if there's anybody there that they would like to grab. So, C. Sanders, I'm sorry. I do apologize. I'm just one person. And at the moment, again, I'm not going to be a fraud. I'm not going to, smoke you guys. I have not looked at that entire list yet to see what's on it. I probably will try to get a chance to look at that in a little while. Although, let me just do one thing here. I'm curious about one thing aside from this. And I don't want you guys to have to do this for me. I am a little bit concerned about, I'm a Yankees fan. I'd love to know that they're beating up on the Nationals. Oh, yes, 5-1 in the top of the 7th. Very nice. Very, very nice. Yankees bouncing back. That's good. I might catch a little bit of that game at the very end tonight. We'll see. J.A. says, is Dart going to change that number? No, I don't think he is. I think Jaxson Dart is sticking with what he's got. I have no reason to believe he's going to change it. Big Pat says he's answering C. Sanders. He says, that's exactly what I was going to look at around the league after this show. Well, I thank you for sticking with the show. Okay, I really do. I appreciate you guys for sticking with me. Your loyalty is very much appreciated. I think that's really cool. And I will scan through the list, believe me. After the show, I will scan through the list. Then I got to be up early tomorrow to get down to the Giants for practice. And, of course, the practice squad guys and more press conferences and more Big Blue Kickoff Live. And the whole cycle just keeps going on and on and on. That's why I don't sleep. Okay, Big Pat says, I was keeping an eye on Mitchell Tinsley in Cincinnati, but he made their initial 53. Going to keep looking. Tulio says, hey, Paulie, big fan from Brazil. What role are we expecting from Hyatt filling a W at Washington? Well, let me see. I guess first thing I should do is answer the question about Jalen Hyatt. I am pleased that Hyatt made the 53. I had him on my 53. He had, in my opinion, during the offseason, he was the most valuable player on offense. But then in the preseason, he got nicked up again, missed some time, And then the other night had 6 targeted passes and only caught 3. One was for a touchdown. 2 of them I graded as drops. The third one was a tough catch. The defensive back kind of ripped at his arm, and there was contact that should not have been allowed. There should have been a penalty, and he was unable to make the play on the ball. But see, that's the thing that coaches look for. They want you to be able to make the play, regardless of whether or not there should have been a penalty. You can't count on the official to throw the flag. So you have to find a way to make the play. And that didn't happen. So Hyatt put himself on a wobbly tightrope over the course of the last couple of weeks. But I still had him on my 53, and I'm still hoping that in year 3 of his professional career, he breaks out and shows everybody what he really can be. Mikey C says, Carson Steele and Chad Mumma are the only 2 players I would try to claim. Tulio says, and I'm not sure who he's talking about, he's definitely not clearing waivers. J-Fed says, personally, I feel every Giant released will clear waivers. Look, that would be marvelous, okay? I still don't think that DeVito will clear, and I'm afraid that Turbo might not clear. And my other guy, I think Dulcich and Chapman. If I had to name the guys who I would be most concerned about, in that order, it would be DeVito, Miller, I would say Chapman, and then Dulcich. And the only reason that I would say that is because I think the Giants' tight end room with the 4 they have is very deep. So if Dulcich does get claimed, good for him, of course. And I don't think the Giants necessarily have to have him back on the practice squad. I do think if Chapman comes back to the practice squad, the Giants will find ways during the season to get him on the roster and in games, even if it turns out to be as a fullback. So that's my personal preference. I have no idea what Joe Shane or Brian Dable are thinking right now, but that would be my preference. Robert Erda, who's been very, very vocal in the chat tonight, says DeVito beating the Packers on Monday Night Football was one of the best Giants games in recent years. Look, that's part of the reason why I think DeVito is what he is, because there are many guys in this league who have been third-string quarterbacks who have had cameo appearances and not done anything with them. As one scout said to me 2 years ago when DeVito beat the Packers with a last-minute drive that led the Giants to a game-winning field goal, he said, that's always one of the litmus tests for every scout. They want to know, they want to see if a backup quarterback gets into a game, in a game-winning situation, can he drive the team down the field? Can he get it done? A lot of QBs never get that chance as backups. They wind up languishing as journeymen and never get a chance to show if they could do it or not. But then there are other journeyman quarterbacks who get a chance to do it and don't. Tommy DeVito did it. As the scout said to me, that's a very big check in the box for him. C. Sanders says, I truly believe we need a wide receiver. No Hyatt slander because that's my boy too, but we need a big receiver with hands for the end zone. Well, again, remember, the practice squad is part of your building too. And because each practice squad guy gets 3 activations, if you want another big receiver, and besides, you've got Collins on this team as it stands tonight. If you want another big receiver, well, we just mentioned little Jordan Humphrey. You could bring him back to the practice squad if you want another big receiver in the building. That's certainly an option, I would think. Remember, he's not waived. He's a free agent. So he does not have to he doesn't get claimed by anybody. If he wants to come back here, he simply comes back tomorrow at 12 o'clock and signs a practice squad deal. Okay? Jay Snow says, I heard the Giants got calls for Jalen Hyatt in a trade. Is that true? I was not in Joe Shane's office today. In fact, I don't go into his office ever, so I do not know if that's true. Jay Snow says, I don't think Hyatt's going to be anything here. It's a matter of opinion. And you know what? This is his third season in the league. It's time to step up and show everybody. If you've really got something to offer in this league, it's time to do it. Everybody usually gets 3 years. And if by the end of your third year you haven't stepped up and shown it, then you usually move on. And that's a really good sign that says you're probably not going to have much of a career. Robert Erda says Spencer Rattler is the Saints quarterback number 1. They got to be maybe thinking about Tommy DeVito. Isaac Moore says New England waived first-round pick offensive lineman Cole Strange. Wow. Jay Snow says about Hyatt, his route running still isn't there. He's not physical enough. C. Sanders says, didn't the Giants just give DeVito a contract, so if the team does claim him off waivers, they would have to honor his contract, correct? That is correct. They would honor the contract, but it's not a very rich deal. DeVito's only in his third year, and he was a restricted free agent. So he's not making an awful lot of money. He's coming in on a very inexpensive deal if you claim him on waivers. Jay Fed says, look at all the quarterbacks released today. Almost have NFL wins under their belt. Guys like DeVito, albeit a nice guy, dime a dozen quarterbacks, nothing special in my opinion. Let me ask you this, Jay Fed. Did you watch the Jets during the preseason much at all? I don't know if you did. I did get a chance to watch them on tape. I'm not very impressed with their quarterback room. And I think I should just probably leave it at that. Big Pat says, can we still trust Hyatt at this point? I'd prefer a more reliable upgrade with the schedule this year. Tulio says, would you have cut Dulcich? I'm very skeptical with Bellinger and Theo. Well, I'm not skeptical with Bellinger and Theo, and the answer is, as much as I like Dulcich during the offseason, yeah, given the fact that I was only going to keep 3 tight ends on my 53, my 3 would have been Johnson, Bellinger, and Manhertz, and I would have tried to bring Dulcich back to the practice squad. Jay Snow says Dulcich can't block. Maybe that's why they cut him. I don't know if that's fair. He's not known as a blocker. He's known more as a receiver since he came out of UCLA a few years ago. That is true. He's much more of a receiving tight end. But I will tell you, he was very productive in doing it during the preseason. Isaac Moore says, I would have cut Hyatt. He won't develop here. We're not extending him, period. Mikey C says, Jenkins and Martinez, practice squad guys. Tulio says, cutting Hyatt is so bad looking for Shane. They'll stick with him for at least another season, I believe. C-Mac the Cable guy says they can easily find an upgrade for Nacho. Isaac Moore says, can't keep doubling down on mistakes. You have to admit when you make mistakes. Rich R says, Beanie Bishop intrigues me as a backup nickel option. Mikey C says, C Steele, because he can play running back, fullback, special teams, and C Mumu is talented. Tulio says, I understand, but it is just easier to keep giving excuses to the Maras. I guess that's probably talking about Hyatt. Perry Mack says, can Drew Phillips play safety? No. Drew Phillips is a nickel corner, a slot corner. That's what he is, period. End of story. Rich R says, Derek Forrest is an intriguing safety option. Okay, let's see here. Jay Snow says they're in trouble if Malik misses any time. Drew Sampson says, how does this work? First time on here, laugh out loud. Well, Drew, you can either go over to the chat, right, post a comment, or you can go to this link right here below the video, And you can dial me up on the telephone or dial me up with a video call if you have a camera working on your computer. All right, let's see here. Mikey C. Drew Phillips is slash safety 2. He have to be on the field. Yeah, well, he's got to be on the field, but he is a slot corner is what he is. Case closed. Drew Sampson says, wish we can get Turbo and Dulcich back. I would love to see them back in the building. Sean Jackson, good evening. He's one of our regulars. Any chance Amir Smith-Marset can return back to the Giants to help us on special teams? I don't know what's going to go there. I think he believes, and justifiably so, that he's an active NFL player who is very good on kickoff returns. And I don't think he's a bad receiver either. So, I don't know. I would think the Giants, based on what we see here on the 53 tonight, I'm sure they're going to sign some wide receivers on the practice squad. Would they necessarily want to sign him back? He's more of a return guy than he is a wide receiver. I don't know the answer to that. That's a very interesting one. I don't know for sure. I'm saying to you, quality-wise, Smith-Marset, in my opinion, I like him. I would always like to have him in the building because I think he's a talented player. Now, does he offer the specific elements that the Giants would want on their practice squad? That is an interesting question, which I do not have the answer to, and I will not pretend that I do. Mark Rototham says, Paul, I didn't know you had your own podcast. I should be ashamed of myself. Mark, don't worry about it. We just completed our first season of the Big Blue Breakdown this past year in 2024. And we are now beginning our second season with the program. And, we do what we can. I try to pump it up on Giants WFAN, which is my Twitter page. I give it as much publicity as I can, but that's about all I can do. So I just hope that word of mouth gets around and people are interested in what we have to bring, because if there was no interest in the program, I would not keep doing it. We have over 1,600 live viewers right now currently, and we are in over 90 minutes on this show. I'll try to go a little bit longer for you folks, because tonight was a very big special given the roster being, broken down to 53. So I'm going a little longer than I anticipated. I thought I was only going to go 90 minutes. We've already passed by that. I certainly won't go past 10 o'clock Eastern time tonight, though. I promise you that. I'm not going past 10. Rich R. Desmond Watson got waived from Tampa. Imagine him and Dexter on the line. That's over 700 pounds of manpower. Desmond, I certainly would not dispute that. Mikey C, it's too many of them. That's why I check the list for players in their third year down. Oh, so you're only looking at waived players. Then you're not going to look at veteran free agents. You're only looking at waivers. And I understand that. Remember, waivers, they go in reverse order of the standings for the first month of the season. So the Giants are number 3, just like in the draft. They pick third. They are third on the list of waiver claims. So what does that mean? It means if a guy is on waivers, they start going in reverse, and the Giants are going to be the third team to have an opportunity to grab a guy. I understand. You hate to lose as many games as the Giants did last year, but it does put you in a great spot with the draft and with the waivers. And why? That's because the NFL sets it up that way. The worse you do, the better off your pick position is, as they try to push parity along. They try to push balance. They know that competitive balance is the best thing for the league. So they try to push that along by reversing the order and giving teams the chance to draft good players and to claim good players. Big Pat says, you're a fan favorite, Paulie. Love that you got this platform too. Thank you for answering. Well, again, thank you for sticking with us on the program. I appreciate the kind words. Benjamin Singer, why haven't they tried Hyatt as a kick returner? He's got the speed, ball security, question mark. Well, we have seen Hyatt occasionally do some return stuff during the course of the practices, but no. I think, in all honesty, if you look at Jalen Hyatt's frame, even though he's up to, 190 pounds, he's not the kind of guy who is going to be very durable if you put him in a kick returner's role. He's going to take some big hits, and I don't think it's going to go too well for him. So I certainly think that's part of the reason why you would not want to put him back there on the returns, because he's more, I don't know if I necessarily want to say he's still lanky, because he is up to 190, but he is more wiry, if you will, than a lot of kick return guys are. Perry Mack says, Eagles might want DeVito for information. Drew Daniels says, no, it's not. It cost us Jaden Daniels. I don't know where he's going with that. Isaac Moore, they have all the information they need. I guess this is pick on Hyatt part of the program, I suppose. Well, you're not going to get anywhere with me because, as I say, I like the kid. I've seen him work. If you saw him work every day during the offseason like I have, chances are you'd probably like him a lot more too. And you'd want to give him one more chance, which is what I would have done. And obviously the Giants have thought the same thing. G-Men 7. How do we only have 3 defensive ends? We need a rotation, not wearing our guys out. All right, the defensive line consists of Dexter, Nacho, Alexander, Robertson Harris, Golston, and Davidson. That's a total of 6 defensive linemen that they are keeping. Dexter and Davidson, Dexter Lawrence and DJ Davidson, are your 2 nose tackles. Golston is more of a defensive end. Nacho is more of a 3 technique. Alexander is more of a 3 technique. And Robertson Harris is more of a 3 technique. So technically, okay, if you want to talk just about a pure defensive end, I would say that Golston is your purest defensive end, although Robertson Harris can also play straight defensive end too as well. And I suppose Alexander also could, although he was, more considered a 3 technique defensive tackle. A lot of this, again, we're playing with a lot of semantics. But they've got 6 defensive linemen. So, no, I don't think, I don't think you have to worry about that. And then, of course, there's the other part, too, that the edge guys also factor into this because they'll play stand-up defensive end. And then sometimes they're going to put their hands down in the dirt, too. It's not necessarily my preference, but that is something that the Giants do. Jay Snow says Collins had a lot of drops, though. Yeah, there were 2 plays the other night that he could have made, and he didn't make them. That's true. John Coulter, I'd trade Tommy for 2 future first-rounders and an eggplant parm. I'd prefer chicken parm over eggplant parm, if that's okay with you. Larry Thomas says, I assume Chapman last chance was fullback. It's safe to say fullback won't be used much this year. Probably not a whole lot. But again, I would bring Chapman back into the building tomorrow. And I think if he does get back into the building, he will get snaps during the course of the season. And some of them are going to be at fullback. I feel pretty confident in saying that. Jay Snow, Evan Neal looked extremely bad against the Pats. I don't see the switch to guard working out either. Well, that's very short-sighted. He had a terrific game against the Jets. He was less impressive against the Patriots, but throughout the entire offseason, he has continuously improved and played well at guard. He did have somewhat of an off night against the Patriots. But again, Jay Snow, if you had seen every practice as I have and seen all the snaps that he's taken, you would realize that the percentage of snaps that he has shown improvement is very, very high. That's the reason he's on the team. But I can't blame you for feeling as you do because you've seen very little. I get that. This is why there needs to be a conduit to the fans so that we can inform you of stuff that you don't have the opportunity to see. I understand that. Kane Crawford, my Giants are going to surprise the league this year. Okay, Isaac Moore says Neal's got to go. It's not working. Jay Snow says Neal footwork is so bad. Okay, so now we've gotten done with the Hammer Hyatt portion of the program. I guess it's time for the Hammer Neal portion, right? What are you going to do? People just love to complain. C. Sanders, chat, smash the like. Not sure I understand. Is that a direction, an instruction, or are you talking about Chapman smashing people with his blocking skills? No, I'm being kind of funny. No, it'd be great. I hope you people like the program. That's what we're here for. Brandon 1120 says Big Blue is back. And Mark B says, there you go. Hit that like button and subscribe. That would be wonderful. All right, so let's see here. We've done an hour and 45 minutes, and we have run out of chats. I also have not had any phone calls or video calls on this show. I don't know why. Maybe some people are shy and bashful. We do get calls on Big Blue Kickoff Live during the day, but we don't get as many on this show as I would like, and I'm a very talkative person. I actually prefer the calls than I do the chats. Jay Snow says, not a knock on Neal as a person, just his play unfortunately hasn't worked out. Again, Jay Snow, that statement is inaccurate. Based on what he has shown the coaches this year, that's an inaccurate statement. He has worked out at guard enough where they believe that he belongs on this team as a guard. That's all you need to know. Kane Crawford said Hyatt is going to come around. He certainly has to. Mikey C says, if the G-men claim it should be a DT or the best player they think available, Neal show improvement by week 4, he'd be the starter. I want to try to decipher this. I want to decipher this piece of chat here. All right, the G-men claim it should be a DT or the best player available. All right, you can put in as many claims as you like for as many players who hit the waiver wire. There's no limit to how many claims you can put in, okay? So each time a player comes through, you can put a claim for as many players as you want. Now, it would not shock me. I could see where their only real nose tackle is Dexter Lawrence. DJ Davidson right now is their only true backup nose tackle. So if you said to me they should be looking on the waiver wire or the free agent market for another defensive tackle, I could not dispute that, right? If they think there's an upgrade at nose tackle over DJ Davidson, it would make sense to go get him. So Mikey C, that part of your statement, yes, I would agree. If they think there's an upgrade at nose tackle available, that would make sense to go get him. Best player they think is available? Well, usually at this time of the year, in this case, what you're trying to do is cherry pick specific weaknesses on your roster. It's not as much best player available as it is in the draft. That's what you do in the draft, right? You definitely go best player available, if at all possible. And you hope it matches up with your need. But here, in the waiver situation at this point of the season, as we're just about to get ready for opening day, the primary focus is to cherry pick and fill holes, not necessarily take the best player available. So I think that answers the second part of your question. Third part of your comment is Neal show improvement and by week 4 he'd be the starter. I do believe that based on what I've seen from Evan Neal during this offseason, the arrow has been pointing up on him. He had a momentary trip up against the Patriots the other night. He definitely scuffled some. There's no question about that. Folks, you saw it. I saw it. There's no sense in saying he was terrific against the Patriots because he was not. That would not be true. That would be an inaccurate statement. He scuffled against the Patriots. It wasn't as bad as some of the critics want to, slam on him. It wasn't terrible, but it certainly was not nearly as good as what he showed against the Jets the week before, where he was terrific against the Jets. I said after the Jets game that it would not surprise me if the arrow continued to point up on him and he continued to ascend and improve every week. He could take a guard spot, a starting guard spot, by a month into the season. I could see that happening. If he continued to ascend, and of course, what do they tell you, right? Usually improvement does not continue to go at an even pace all the way up the ladder. Usually it's a little bit of a stutter step and a stutter step and a stutter step and maybe a little backwards and then it goes up again. Let's see. Do I think that Evan Neal could seize a starting guard job by midseason? A month in, midseason, 2/3 of the way through the season, by the end of the year? The answer to all of those questions is yes. I do think at some point this year, and I'm not going to predict the week, but it would not surprise me if a month into this season, Evan Neal is starting at one of the Giants' guard spots. No, that would not surprise me. We're not going to sit here and say that Greg Van Roten in particular, who's been in this league, a dozen years, and he's been a backup for a lot of those years. He played well last season. He was consistent, but he's also on the other side of 30. Is he a Pro Bowl level player that should be guaranteed a starting spot for the year? No, he's not. If Evan Neal continues to progress and passes him at some point, the Giants need to make a change. If Evan Neal does not progress, then he needs to remain a backup. If Greg Van Roten starts to show signs of slippage, then he should, right? Any player who shows signs of slippage should come out of the starting lineup, and then you see if the backup can do better. These things are all possible. Brandon 1120, do you want to see Jaxson Dart this season play at all? Well, in a perfect scenario, and it's been said by the Giants people, in a perfect scenario, Russell Wilson has a terrific season. The Giants are in the playoff race all the way through, and there's no need to go to any backup quarterback. That's the best case scenario. That's really what you want to see happen. If you're a Giants fan, that's what you want. You want Russell Wilson to play so well that he leads the Giants to a winning record, a successful season, and gets them into the playoffs. Now, you want to say that's a pipe dream, you're entitled to say that. That's okay. But nobody plays this game to lose. People play this game and put their bodies through hell to try to win. So don't tell me or tell any of the Giants players that they don't have any business dreaming about a winning season. That's not fair to them. They have a right to feel that way. They have a right to try to win as many games as they can and to try to make the playoffs. That is the goal. So, no, in a perfect world, that happens. And if there's a blowout or two along the way, and they decide they want to give Jaxson Dart a possession in the fourth quarter of a blowout because he has earned that right? And only if he's earned that right do you think about putting him in. Because here's the deal, Brandon, 1120. The most important thing the Giants need to do with Jaxson Dart is to make sure that his development is as clean as can be. They don't want to make a mistake with him or do something with him that could set him back. That's something they don't want to do. So what they're going to do during the course of the year is monitor his development as best as they can. And if Jaxson Dart shows them that they believe he can reasonably go into a game and have a chance to compete, and then if the situation calls for it, these two things have to happen. They have to believe that he's ready to go into a game, and then there has to be a situation that suits the Giants to put him in. If those two things happen, then yes, I could see Jaxson Dart possibly getting some snaps this year. But as I have said on this show and the Big Blue Kickoff Live show many times before, the desired scenario is that the Giants are competitive all the way through. Russell Wilson plays really well. The Giants actually knock on the door and get into the playoffs, and Jaxson Dart doesn't play. That's okay. There's this rush that every rookie quarterback has to get in right away. No. Now, what did the Chiefs do with Mahomes? Alex Smith played all the way to the last game of the season. They clinched the playoff spot. And then they said, okay, Patrick Mahomes, you can play the last game because we accomplished our goal. We had a successful season. Alex Smith played really, really well, got us to the playoffs. This last game, okay, Patrick Mahomes, it looks like you're ready to compete. We're going to let you have the last game. If that happens, boy, sign up for it. Sign up for it. How awesome would that be if the Giants lock up a playoff spot with one game to go and they can afford to give, hopefully, a growing and maturing and learning Jaxson Dart the last game of the season? Wouldn't that be wonderful? Now, I think that's asking an awful lot for all of those circumstances to happen, for every one of those dominoes to line up. I think that is asking a lot. But wouldn't that be wonderful? But we got a lot of hypotheticals involved in this question, Brandon. So I appreciate the question. But I think it's probably be best for everybody to put in their minds, no, let the rookie redshirt. And if situations and circumstances happen to line up and he happens to get in a game, that's nice. But I think everybody's better off pumping the brakes and thinking red shirt rookie, and then see where it takes you. Okay, let's see. Brian Thomas, we owe nothing to Wilson. I don't know exactly what he means by that. Jay Snow, do you think Neal is the first guard up if an injury hits? Yes, I do. Mikey C, remember it's based on spots which carry during the season. Again, I don't know what some of these fragments, this is why the chat is not as good as a phone call, guys, because some of these fragments just don't work very well. Brian Thomas says, supposedly they might use Neal in run situations. Well, if you've got a goal line or a second and third and short or a fourth and short, why wouldn't you bring in Evan Neal as an extra offensive lineman? Come on, why not? I'm all for it. You know I love the jumbo package. Anybody who's ever listened to me knows I love bringing in a sixth offensive lineman in a short yardage situation and just pound it down somebody's throat. Absolutely. Go for it, baby. I'm with you there, Brian Thomas. I'd love to see that. Giovanni, Paul, out of all the draft picks, who was your favorite and who was the most disappointing? Well, it would be incredibly difficult to pick a favorite or a disappointing guy based on just an off season and 3 preseason games. It doesn't make any sense. Not right now, it doesn't. What we do know is that all of the draft picks are here. None of the draft picks got cut. And only one undrafted rookie free agent made the team. That's Collins. So Dart looks like he's got a great future. So does Carter. Carter looks like he has a great present. Alexander has an awful lot to offer, but he's a bit raw. He's making a big jump to the NFL from Toledo. That's a big, big jump. He's shown some flashes, but he's got a long way to go. Scadaboo's ready right away. I think we all seen that. Fedoni's a very exciting player with a lot of potential. Black we haven't seen a whole lot of, to be honest. He's missed some time during the last month or so. And so it's kind of hard really to get a really good gauge on him. I mean, I'm just being honest with you. I don't want to say he's the most disappointing. Okay? I don't want to say that because it would be unfair to him. I think my comment on Black is that it's incomplete. You know? Now, here's what I will say. Who's the most surprising? I think it's Marcus Beaux. Marcus Beaux had 2 terrific preseason games. Terrific preseason games. Not just good, but terrific preseason games. In fact, the whole preseason he was good. But 2 terrific ones. And looks like, holy smokes, he could play either tackle. I don't want to get too carried away, but for a guy who was a 5th-round draft choice, I'd say the most surprising, the one who seems to have raised the floor or raised expectations further than anybody could have imagined, it's got to be Marcus Beaux. He was drafted, I thought, as a project, as a guy who was going to sit around and redshirt a season, and hopefully next year, if 1 or 2 of the Giants' offensive linemen left, he would then be in line to compete for a starting job. Maybe the O-line's going to play well, and there won't be room for Marcus Beaux to play during the course of this season. Maybe that's the case. But what we saw in the preseason games from him was really good. Really good. So that was a surprise. All right, guys, that's going to have to do it. I appreciate everybody for joining us tonight, but it's now 10 o'clock. We have gone just over 2 hours on the Big Blue Breakdown Live here, part of the New York Giants on SI YouTube channel and media network. It has been a great pleasure to talk Giants football with you tonight, as it always is. Remember now, folks, I'm going to try to come back tomorrow, and maybe if there's a significant amount of juggling of the roster tomorrow with waiver claims and free agents and practice squad, I'll probably try to come back and do a really quick, short-taped reaction to the Giants' second 53. Remember, today was the first 53. Tomorrow is the second 53. I might try to do that for you tomorrow. Just, subscribe to us, like us, look for the Big Blue Breakdown tomorrow. And again, depending upon, if there's like one transaction, I might not do it, but we'll see if it's worth talking about. And then, of course, I'll be back again next Wednesday night with another edition of the Big Blue Breakdown. We'll be here live, taking your chats, your audio phone calls, and your video phone calls, because after all, what's better than talking New York Giants football? Until then, I'm Paul Dottino. Have a great night, everybody, and enjoy yourselves. Bye now.